Hey, we got somebody already. See, is that somebody that's joining me, or is that just saying that it's me? I have no idea yet. All right, so well, there's clearly people here. You guys rock. Good morning, Bears. Hey, Chunk says good morning. Hi, Chunk. Hi, bud. Chunk, Gerby. These are my co-hosts now. I figured this works out. I'm just popping up to the front window. It's kind of fun. Morning, Dom. What up, dude? Thanks, man. Hey, Hangout was fun yesterday for whatever I could join with you guys on. Last night, goodness, around close to midnight Central Time, there's some intense discussion going on from a couple, and I can't remember who it was that was discussing. A feather made of metal. I've seen you in the chat a little bit, and you've got a ridiculously cool screen name. I dig that. Dom, Networking Bear Tough is also cool. Now, Dom, is Tough your last name? Like, I'm still learning stuff about all you guys. Probably a major noob question. Sorry, guys, I'm playing all this stuff down here that I want to bring out during the stream. That's real professional. Let's lead off. Oh, hey, it's garbage day. You know what? It's recycling today, I believe. And I wasn't expecting them to come this early. Thank you. My sister gave me this and the hat. I'm kind of getting in the mood for heading to Alaska later this year. So check it out. Let the dogs entertain you for all of like 60 seconds. I'm going to run and grab the garbage, the recycling can, and put it up front since they're here. Wife would be pretty upset if I didn't do that. So hang with me. Hang tough. Tell everybody else I'm here. Dogs, come entertain the people. Chunk, come entertain the people. And just like that, I'm back. That was super pro, right? Stuff on my thing there. All right, so great to see folks piling in. I'm going to scoot this back just a hair. Let's see if I can share something with you guys. All right, this, what I'll do, is what we in the drumming business call a practice pad. This is an old practice pad. Steve, how you doing, sir? 8-bit, good to see you this morning. Blue Sky, it's good to see you. All right, so it's a little crooked, but nothing I can do. So this is something that we drummers use to work out our finger technique, right? Just to be able to warm up our fingers, get stuff going. And it's supposed to be quieter than actually using a real drum. My fingers are clearly not warmed up yet. So I'll work on stuff with the old Ringo Starr style thing, the German style grip that we used to call it. Actually, it's more like this with your wrist flat. And he was real famous for that in the Beatles. But then you saw a lot of jazz drummers, Buddy Rich and some of those big famous names, Gene Krupa, using this, what they call the traditional style. Back in the Civil War days and even before, Revolutionary War. Hey, Kikia, welcome. Yeah, back in the day, they would have these drums that were tilted, you know, on a rope, the stuff that the military drummer boys, and I'm pretty sure they didn't have drummer girls back then. Maybe they had like a move-on who snuck in. you know, that kind of a thing. But not saying an Asian person, I'm saying, I'm saying, you know, the same kind of situation, but you guys know what I'm saying. Maybe you do. So it had these drums strung on a rope around the shoulder, tilted, as some of you probably already know. And so to be able to hit the left side of that drum, they have to have their stick at an angle up here. So this grip had been developed, I think, centuries ago. It's been around for a long time. This is how they would play. And still, rudimental drummers, people that focused on, you know, classical or how would I put it, more regimented written stuff for a long time throughout the late 1800s, early 19. And still, even today, we've got plenty of folks that just focus on rudimental drumming. They still like to have their drums tilted like that when they play, and they'll use the traditional grip. There's a lot of jazz drum set players. I talked about Peter Erskine the other day. He's one of a ton, you know, and I think we're going to bring up some of that today, since the show is called Influences. Yeah, there's been a number of people, majority, I think, of the drummers that I've learned from as I've been growing up, who use this traditional grip thing, right? Before we go, here's something funny. I don't know how well this pops up. So I was going through my stuff. I found this. This was my sophomore year in high school. That would have been 98. My student ID from Metamora High. It's a little freaky. I don't know why they put a tablecloth behind me. I think that was just their thing. But yeah, little 2-second snippet to tuck in the middle of the live stream. So if you weren't here, you know, well, you didn't miss it because you could always watch this later. But that's now on the internet. Wonderful. All right. So I believe it was Mama Bear. It may have been somebody else who was asking me for a list of books that you guys want to put on the book bear book list, right? Thank you. Oh, that was laughing for something else. That's all right. Yeah, I do weird things. Right on, right on. So here's a few books that I think are extremely important for drumming, and I'll get into other instruments as we move forward. Some of the ones I find to be essential. There's one I don't have a copy with me for today. I actually have it in my Kindle app. I've got a copy of a bunch of these different books. It's going to get a little loud here because the recycling truck is just coming by. So, Stick Control by George Lawrence Stone, written in 1935. It's a gray book with an old colonial days drummer guy on the front, wearing a tri-cornered hat, that kind of deal. All right. Hey, thank you guys very much. Let's see. Yeah, I will make a list. I'll write them out. But I just wanted to show some of them so that you could see these books. So, yeah, Stick Control by George Stone. That's going to be one of my first ones on the list because every student I have ever had or ever will have, I recommend that to almost right away. This one, Syncopation by Ted Reed. It's actually called Progressive Steps to Syncopation for the modern drummer. And it's really, really cool because it takes you through a bunch of different rhythms, right? And I'm just going to give you a quick example. I hope that's not like illegal, but a quick example, just some of that. It's not even a full page, but you can see you've got like 16th notes and quarter notes and stuff like that. The top half, the idea is you usually play that with your left hand. And this is assuming you're a right-handed drummer. So you'll play that on the snare drum with your right hand. With the left hand, they'll often have you play like the jazz ride cymbal pattern. The spang, spang-a-lang, spang-a-lang, spang-a-lang. That's what they call it. And you're going, you know, you play 16 notes, quarter notes, or 8 notes. Get these different rhythms that don't usually go together to get to fit together. A syncopation in music is really defined as playing on a non-dominant beat or accenting on a non-dominant beat within a measure of music. And that creates that interesting feel we call syncopation, where you want to dance, right? So I'm teaching a lesson yesterday afternoon. One of my students, I'm giving her the concepts of Latin rhythms. And we talked a little bit about a simple Mozambique variation, Mozambique Latin pattern. So it was something like, probably be easier by cowbell. So, little cowbell pattern there, and they'll play that on cowbell or, well, thank you very much. Yeah, you got to have that. By the way, I should just say, I have more cowbell. This one's my heavy duty. You do have to have more cowbell kick. It's required, you know. This is my bruiser that I've probably had this for close to 20 years. Got it from a good buddy of mine. One of my first sort of mentors in drumming, Troy Teeny. A guy was drumming for a band that I was coming into when I was about 16. It was a metal ska band back in the late 90s. And Troy was heading out. He's moving out of state. So they were looking at me coming in, and Troy kind of gave me the ropes of what they did. I only ever played like one gig with them, but it was still fun going to practices. They worked in this old abandoned warehouse. The band was called Wasted Time. And they were a ton of fun. A lot of those guys ended up reforming like a progressive metal band. You know, so they play like Dream Theater-y kind of stuff, you know, with a little bit of Rush influence in there, other stuff like that. It's kind of cool. Yes, they are. You were absolutely right, Dom. They like my live stream, maybe. No, not really. So just trying to reach more stuff that I had sitting aside here. Yeah. Drum books. let's try to keep on topic somewhat. But I love to hit the rabbit trails. I love to go up to the side and catch other little interesting things. I can do that all day. Maybe I'll just have a live stream one day where we do nothing but rabbit trails. That'd be like, you know, the average everyday bear chat. But no, there's some serious stuff that happens once in a while. Let's see here. Do some drills and mixing things like 3/4 and 7/8, like Neil Peart. Yeah. And we will talk. I'll talk about that. I'm going to remember that you said that. I'm going to come back to that. Yeah, putting odd times together. In fact, yeah, I'll just say it now. There's a group I've mentioned a few times, Dream Theater, and they used to have a guy playing for the first 20-some years, a guy named Mike Portnoy on drums. Mike used to do this thing. Well, the whole band did this thing on an album. I want to say it was late 90s, early 2000s, and this one came out early 2000, I think, right around then. It was called Scenes from a Memory. It was a concept album. The whole album was all one big story, you know. Some of the songs were really, really long. So they had this tune in there. It was called The Dance of Eternity. And you can go YouTube that one. It's actually really cool. Maybe later I'll pop a link for it. Dance of Eternity by Dream Theater. And it's super cool because they actually run through like every time signature you could imagine. Like for those that aren't necessarily as musical, right? Time signature, what am I saying? You probably know, even if you haven't articulated it before. Time signature is just a way to decide how you're going to group up the music. You cut music up into measures, right? Little digestible bites of a song so that you can work through it. Now, I'll give you an example in drum music. So like this exercise book here. This is another one I was going to recommend. Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer by Jim Riley. He's killer. He's got a whole thing talking about this book on Drumeo, which is a great channel if you want to learn more about drums. Jared Falk, Canadian guy, started this whole thing, and they have some of the greatest drummers come on there and do lessons. But a measure. All right, so each one of these exercises is one measure of music, and it's in what we call 4/4 time. At the top number means how many beats are in a measure, right? And the bottom number is what type of note gets the beat. You can see these are eighth notes is what they're called. That's the type of subdivision. Now, 2 eighth notes equals 1 quarter note, right? So a quarter note is why they have that 4 down there, the bottom 4. It's super hard to see, I know. But what that's telling you is that the quarter note is what they're going to give the numerical beat to. And you're going to count like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That number is the beat of the music, right? So how many beats are we going to have? In 4/4 time, it's 4, right? I know this is dry for those of you that are musicians already know this. So if you have really bizarre music, maybe you could have something in there that's like 7/8, so the eighth note gets the beat, and there's only 7 of them in a measure. Or 9/8 is another fun one to play in. Some of the songs I've enjoyed have a thing that varies between 6/8 and 7/8, back and forth, switching between those two for a whole section of the song. Something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Something like that. So that's an example of switching between 6/8 and 7/8, right? One of my favorites is a really bizarre time called 1916 time, and you're almost never going to use that professionally, right? Unless you're in a Dream Theater cover band or some other crap like that. Thanks, Dom. So the chat's like doing the evil YouTube overlords thing where it's blinking at me once in a while. So yeah, 1916 time, 16th note, right? 1/16 of a measure 4/4 time, right? A 16th note, which is like a 1/4 of a quarter note. You've got 19 of those in a measure. So it's essentially like a 16/16 time would be the same thing as 4/4 time. It's just subdivided down to the 16th note. So 1916, that would end up being 3 little more 16th notes tacked on the end. So I would play that like I'm thinking in 4/4 time, but I just tack on 3 little 16th notes. Like 1, 2. I'm going to play proper. Let me get my hat up here so it's a little easier. There we go. 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, I take 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, I take 2 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, I take 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, I take. So it's like, let me slow that down a little bit. 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen. I would count that as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. But I'm not going to count like that when I'm playing, right? I'm going to group it into the larger subdivisions when it's that much of a speed at that high level of subdivision. So it's easier for my brain to process all of that coming at me. When you have a ton of stuff, you have to slow down your internal clock, right? When you're playing really fast, you have to slow your internal clock. When you're playing really slow, you got to speed up your internal clock. You've got to have more stuff going. I learned that from another famous drummer. I should have that book. I think it's in the car. So I probably was using it with a student or something recently. But it's called Inside Out by Billy Ward. That's another one that I highly recommend. No matter what instrument you play, it will change your whole perception of how you think about time. Time's not something that we can physically interact with usually. It's an abstract concept to us, but we are measuring it, right? It's something that it exists clearly. We exist in time, as the creatures we are. So musicians are trying to mark that so that they can operate together when they play a piece. So the way you think about time can change the feel of a song, right? You may not be able to pick up on the way I'm doing this. It's a subtle deal, but if I'm thinking in my mind, straight ahead 16 notes, I'm thinking 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen. I'm only playing 8 notes with this hand, and then I'm playing every second and fourth beat with my left hand, right? 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, 1 and 2 and 3 yen, 3 yen. I'm in my head. I'm going 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen. I'm counting the 16th notes. But what if I went and thought in triplets, right? Groups of 3s, right? 1 ta-ta, 2 ta-ta, 3 ta-ta, 4 ta-ta, and I play the same beat, right? if you are playing along with that, where I'm thinking one yen to yen to yen to yen, or I switch to 1 2 2 2 3 4 what I've played out here hasn't changed, right? But it has just a little bit because my internal clock has changed. Right now, I'm thinking in a completely different feel, which is called triplets. So they call that some people would call that your undertow, right? I think that's what Billy Ward talks about in his book. So Billy Ward, Inside Out, highly recommend that one. Another one, The Art of Bop Drumming by John Riley. If you're into jazz, this will blow your mind. And he has, snippets from some of the greatest jazz players. Art Blakey. Art Blakey is just a force of nature. One of the most amazing jazz drummers from that era, from any era. It's just Philly Joe Jones, another one that's just such a joy to watch. You get so excited watching cats like this. Elvin Jones is not listed in this book, but he's another one that was ridiculously a force of nature. The stream is moving to the beat. I need to introduce you to a friend of mine who find him on Facebook. Okay, Dr. John, or not doctor. I don't know why I said doctor. I think I would like him, Steve. That's way cool. Yeah, I'm missing out on something. Somebody said Billy Cobham. Honky Bear, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Billy Cobham, one of the greats. One of the greats. That guy's just another unbelievable force of nature. I was thinking more so in jazz idiom for the moment, but yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. Let's move over to funk, right? Rick Latham, first professional I ever saw in a drum clinic where I went to see some other, another amazing drummer. My first drum teacher took me to meet this guy. Advanced Funk Studies by Rick Latham, probably one of the most foundational books out there for getting into different permutations, different possibilities of playing types of funk beats. And he's got transcriptions of some of the greatest tunes of all time. Who remembers Paul Simon from Simon and Garfunkel? Yeah, for sure, man. For sure, Honky Bear. Anytime, dude. If you remember Simon and Garfunkel, you're going to remember Paul Simon later on did his own stuff, and he had a song called 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to keep up chat. You guys are in your own conversation over there, too. 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Classic tune by Paul. Almost everybody knows that one. And Steve Gadd was the drummer on that. Yes, it is a great song. You're absolutely right. I didn't understand how great until Steve broke that down in a clinic I watched of his. He created this based out of like a military drum beat. He grew up playing like military style drumming, rudimental drumming, when he was at school, when he was a kid. And he'd go around with one of those drums slightly tilted to the side kind of thing. I think they might have eventually started switching to the flat version, but I think he used to play the road strung drums. He brought this beat out for Paul, and it was just something like so really straightforward, really simple little beat to start out the intro to that song, and he mixes it up between the snare drum, the hi-hat, and his bass drum, and then like a little knock on the floor tom every once in a while. The big, huge sounding drum over here. The bass drum, that's the one you hit with your foot. The floor tom, that's the one that's usually, if you're a typical right-handed drummer, and I think 90-odd% of people are. I think with drummers, it's probably a larger percentage. Though, I mean, I know some smoking left-handies. It's ridiculous. But that aside, the floor tom is usually off to a drummer's right side. And a lot of times we'll have like the snare drum, the bass drum, and then tom-toms, right? Snare has specific distinct sound. Bass drum, that's a specific distinct sound, very deep and low, while the snare is much more high-pitched. And it's the interplay between those two. That's the foundation of most music, is the low pitch and the high pitch. So those are the foundation for a lot of Western music. Then you got the tom-toms, where we bring in other fills and things, and they're a distinct tone, but they're more clean and clear. They're not as deep as the bass drum, then as high as the snare usually, and you might have anywhere from 2 to some people have like 30. Terry Bozzio, who played for Frank Zappa, played for Missing Persons, UK, a ton of different groups that he's worked with over the years. He's an insane musician. And he does like solo performances on this massive, gigantic drum kit. So he has over 30 or more toms, all tuned to different pitches. He'll play melodies with like his right hand, bass lines with the left. Excuse me, I switched that. Melodies with the left, bass lines with right. Or he'll do it the other way, you know, play a low melody and play some other high-pitched little thing over here. And with his feet, he's doing ostinato patterns. They call it just like a consistent, continual rhythmic pattern. You know, he'll do it between bass drums and like the hi-hats, the two cymbals that come together. But he has more than just hi-hats. He's got like Chinese cymbals, like gong-sounding cymbals that he has coming together on those stands that he activates with his foot. So it's something like all this crazy stuff on top of that pattern that doesn't shift. Ridiculous. So yeah, I encourage you to check that out. But I brought up the 4-tom because I was talking about Steve Gadd playing that beat for the 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. I can't believe I can still follow my train of thought after following rabbit trails that far. It's so much fun, guys. This is a blast. I love doing this. I'm going to put out a Joel Rothman book here. Joel Rothman, he's been an author of drum books for years. And just a wonderful, wonderful author of this kind of material. He sent me like a bunch of free books, and maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but it's like, I think from time to time, he shared things with certain teachers, you know, and go buy his stuff. Go buy Joel Rothman's stuff if you're a drummer. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of these. This is reading Rudiments in Rock Drumming, and this is one of a gazillion titles, you know, but it's got a bunch of really cool exercises that are all rooted to I'm looking for a certain page here, rooted to specific what they call rudiments. And I'm going to explain that in a minute for those who don't know. So like this is the front page. It's got some of the important information you want to know about how you read music, all that jazz. And then he's got it lined out really, really straightforwardly. He'll even give you like exercises in odd time signatures to start out with, like in the early pages of certain books. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. I should have been dealing with 7s and 9s and things like that when I was a kid. But, and I did because I listened to groups like Rush, Mr. Neil Peart. That was why I wanted to start drumming. Tom Sawyer, my first drum teacher played me Tom Sawyer by Rush off the Moving Pictures album, 1981, Mercury Records, Terry Brown producing, I believe. I'm a Rush nerd, yeah, but I'm not that good. I just pretend to be. You darn right, Blue Sky Bear, best. So yeah, that got me started because they're ridiculous. They're so good. Their whole career, they've done interesting things. And so I knew I wanted to be a drummer after I heard that tune. I knew I had to be. You were at which concert? 1981 Moving Pictures Tour? Don't feel bad, Pinder. I was only born the year after that came out. That's awesome, man. So this thing I highly recommend too. This is a manuscript book that Hal Leonard Publications puts out. It's got this nice drum workshop drum kit on there, or at least it looks like a drum workshop. It's got the same lug style. A lot of times you can tell a brand of drums if you've been hanging around them long enough by the little hardware parts that are on the outside of them, stuff like that, or like the stands that the cymbals are on. You know, this one has this little plastic. That's almost impossible to see. Little plastic turner thing. So you can alter the position of your cymbal on your stand. And there's only a handful of brands that use a style like that. So little things like that can clue you in on stuff. But this just looks fun because DW are like the Cadillac of drums, or at least they've been considered that by a lot. So you feel cool as a drummer when you know what that is. You're like, I've got this. But it's all blank pages, right? It's all blank. You just write down your own ideas in there. You get the notes of different stuff in the book. It's like $3, man. Let's see here. So here's your list. The Percussive Arts Society International Drum Rudiments list. And there's 40 of them. 4 groups of rudiments, the rolls, the diddles, flams, and rags. And within each of those, there's a slew of different types. There were 13 original rudiments that were used in the military. I actually have this. It's so cool. It's a 1864 manual for fife and drum in the United States Army. and it has all these different like calls that they would have to play at different times of the day. It's got stuff I think they would play during battle, like that would be signals to let the troops know when to advance or retreat or do other stuff. It's got a lot of history on that. It talks about a really weird story that it references in there. This is kind of cool, and this influenced me, right? This definitely has influenced me. I've got to do something with this at some point. There was a Bohemian general named Jan Žižka, right? Jan Žižka. Maybe somebody have heard some. I mean, some of you have heard of Jan Žižka. Not sure. Interesting character. It's a little gruesome, right? A little graphic, but he was feared. His battle tactics were incredibly advanced for that time. I'm going to lie to you if I tell you the time frame. I want to say 1200s or so. It's starting to rain, man. I might go grab an umbrella. So Jan Žižka, he was feared by a lot of different people. I want to say it was elements of the government in that area that were highly led by the Catholic Church at that time, back when maybe some sections of that were not as pleasant as they might be nowadays. So I think Jan and some of the others were more Protestant in their views, but resisted the Catholic. I'm probably going to misrepresent this entire thing, so check me. What I'm saying might be, I'm trying to do it from memory, and I don't 100% remember. But this is mentioned at the beginnings of this fife and drum manual. And it just talks about the tradition of drums in battle. So Jan died, and there's, I guess, a possibly apocryphal legend that when Žižka died, he wanted to still have his name be feared for the military there in battle. And he insisted that his skin be used post-mortem to rehead the drums for the military drummers there. And so that way the enemy would get this rumor spread to them that when they heard the drums coming for battle, they'd be hearing his body, his skin, basically putting the fear of God, or fear of Žižka, I guess, in his mind, into them, and give them this massive psychological advantage in battle. I would love to create like a series around that, like a book or something like that, like kids book. Yeah, kids book. Like, wait, what? Something younger adult series, because it is a little creepy. But and I've had some people look at me like, that's gross. Why are you telling me that? It's history. It's just what happened. A lot of history is gross. You know, Big Bear would say the same. He has several times. Plenty of other people that I revere that have spoken plenty about history. History was pretty bad. You know, Doc Peterson's like, that's pretty much what people dealt with most of history. Stuff sucked. You know, I'm not even going to say it, Honky Bear. Jeez. I'll let you guess where Honky Bear took that. Yeah, well, you don't have to guess. You're reading the chat. I had to know that was going to come up sooner or later. Skin flute. I said it. All right. Anyway, so, yeah, it would be really cool to create like this adventure story that introduces the whole concept of rudiments and the fundamentals of drumming, but puts kids like on a quest or something to discover one of the ancient skin drums of Jan Žižka. You know, I don't know, interesting idea, and I'd love to narrate it, read it out myself. I grew up being influenced by an author named Frank Peretti. I don't know who's heard of this cat, but he was one of the first like Christian fiction authors, or Christian like fantasy almost authors, and he created probably not the first, but he did some different things that weren't common at that time. Ancient skin drums, yeah, pretty wild stuff. I agree. I'm just trying to keep up. I don't love to ignore people in the chats. I like to continue to see what people are talking about. I'm going to go back through this later and talk at you guys a little bit, because this is super cool. Trying to retain my train of thought here. I was saying skin drums. Then I went on to talk about book. Frank Peretti. There we go. Frank Peretti. Yep. Thank you, Blue Sky. We're right there, almost right together. Yes, you're right, Honky Bear. The Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. That is incredible too. I'm going to forget the first one. Yeah, Out of a Silent Planet, Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength, I believe, are that trio. Very interesting. He did some unique stuff back then. So yeah, you've had Christian fiction authors like you've had the Chronicles of Narnia and all that stuff from back in the day. But Frank Peretti, yes, very scary prophetic stuff. He's interesting in the way he writes. He had a pair of books that I read at a much younger age, and I got to hear them being read by Peretti on tape. It was all dramatized, and they were called This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness, and they were very, very cool. And he talked about the dealings between the angels and demons that were involved behind the scenes on all the stuff that was happening in our world, so to speak. So different events are happening. There's like in the first book, some sort of big mogul who's trying to take over a college in a small town, little community college, and make it a hive for this unified consciousness society. And it turns out that it's all being pushed forward by demonic influences. This mass of demons that's like creating a safe haven for themselves in this town. And then the angels, they can't do anything unless the biblical believers are praying about it. They have to have what they call prayer cover. And it gets very intense. Whenever there's a demon voice, the guy who wrote the book, Frank, he's using a voice modulator in the recordings to make it sound even dark and distorted. And it's really, really cool. It's not super cheesy. It's pretty well dramatized. Okay, it's got its cheese element to it, I'll be honest, but they're fun. They're just fun. And he reads abridged versions of them in the book on tape ones. And then I think you've got some versions that I've got on Audible where there's another guy reading the full unedited versions too, but they're not dramatized in the same way. That's always made me think it would be so cool to do like a book series that has it has those elements that I talk about in my teaching philosophy like yesterday. You know, it gets them to think about the what you're doing, the wisdom part of music. It talk about the physical part, like how you would train yourself. It would talk about the spiritual, the higher purpose side of things, and it talk about the relational. You know, all of those things would be dealt with in the form of a narrative. So maybe that'll happen, and I would love to narrate it. I would love to create music for it. I think that's a project down the road. One day I'm planning to have like a studio out back at the house here. That'll be for teaching. It'll be for all these different productions. You know, Crowder built up his own studio at home. He started with just a tiny little den, you know, and built up from there. So I'm more and more inspired by seeing folks like that who've gone forward and done this kind of thing. They don't need, you know, to have some sort of huge sponsorship and backing by a major studio or anything like that. They just little by little they get there. So that's a future plan. Yeah, Frank Peretti, another influence, well worth checking out. While we're talking about authors, I'll throw in another one. If you haven't heard of Ted Dekker and the Circle trilogy, which is actually 4 books, if you can wrap your head around that, a trilogy is 4 books. It's 1, 2, 3, and then 0, which came out last, but it connects the entire story to be cyclical. That was a wild, wild ride. I started that one back in 2004 when I first went to Iraq. Nico McBrain is the worship leader in a church you grew up in? Are you serious? Are you serious? That's flipping hilarious. Iron Maiden's drummer. Sorry, that one caught my attention. If you're kidding, that's hilarious. If you're not, that's amazing. Either way. So, Ted Dekker, author of the Circle trilogy. Yeah, he titled each book a different color: black, red, white, and green. I think was book 0. So really interesting. You start following a character named Thomas Hunter and his experiences of like switching back and forth between this world where he's experiencing some weird stuff going on, and suddenly he's like thousands of years in the future, and it's almost a little bit like G.H. Wells' Time Machine, you know, and the kind of world that that character encounters. He goes like thousands and thousands of years into the future. but it's strange. Everything's gone backwards. We're not doing the technological stuff we're doing now. It's reduced back to more of an agrarian society, but there's still some weird stuff. I think he definitely drew on some H.G. Wells in the way he put that world together. But it's way more cool. There's kung fu going on in a Christian science fiction novel. It's pretty cool. Time travel-y stuff. It's pretty neat. So I'd recommend that. There's even a graphic novel version of the first 3 books put together. There's probably one with all 4 now. That author blew my mind. Pretty interesting guy. He just went places I wouldn't expect. I'm going to throw some DVDs out as well that I want to recommend if you're into drums. And like I said, we'll do other instruments, but I want to talk about influences. So I talked about this guy, Steve Gadd. This is a Hudson Music one. I'm not even trying to sell these. I'm just saying they're awesome, right? Like I don't have links where you buy this, I'll get a commission. Like that's not what all this is. I think you guys can tell. I do have a commission link for that Neuro 67 stuff, but you know, I'm not going to go promo code Aaron. You know, I'm not going to get Shapiro on you with it. I think that's mildly inappropriate for this time. That quote's never going to get old to me because it's so funny. Yeah, the Gadd. This cat is probably the most recorded drummer of Bowling Branch Sheets. He's most recorded drummer of 20th century, easily. Maybe I'm overstating that, but I've heard it spoken that he's been on more albums than one can count. Just constantly working, and he's so talented. Highly recommend this. It was the Hudson Master Series. Hudson Music Master Series. Steve Smith from Journey. I know somebody mentioned Journey earlier. Was it Honky Bear? Steve Smith, amazing cat. He was a jazz drummer. He went to Berkeley, flunked out his first semester, as I'm told, and said, okay, well, that stunk. He practiced over the summer, went back. He practiced like 8 to 10 hours a day, went back and smoked it top of his class at Berkeley. Just amazing. And he went into a rock group because he was told he needed to kind of diversify his abilities, you know, just widen his capabilities. So yeah, one of the greatest rock drummers of all time. He talks about the history of drumming as it's been to us over the last 100 years. Really cool stuff he digs into there. Mention a book by John Riley. Here's a DVD by John Riley. A lot of jazz stuff. This is a good one. It's drier. His presentation style is a little drier, but it's so full of useful stuff. It doesn't always have to be exciting. Sometimes the information in and of itself is worth it. John Blackwell, formerly of Prince, rest in peace. This guy passed away. I remember last year we were driving down to vacation last year to see my folks, and I saw the tweet. This guy died, and he'd been struggling with cancer for several months. Left, wife and I believe 2 kids. Beautiful little kiddos. He used to write songs. This DVD is a great bit of his work. He's got a song in here that he wrote for his son Jeremiah, and this guy's all about the grooves. That's how he got Prince to recognize he was so ridiculously good and that he needed him in his music, is because he's all about the groove. I met cats in South Carolina that were friends of his, like that knew John, right? Back when I was down there a couple of years ago, and that was his hometown. It was around near Columbia, South Carolina, probably a little further out from there. But yeah. I mean, he grew up around the church scene kind of stuff. He was just smoking good. If you don't know about this guy, find out. It's just amazing to watch. One of the things I love about him, he used to have a Chinese symbol, like one of those gong-like symbols, back behind him, like over here behind him. And then he'd have these cool things where he'd be flailing around and flip it back behind him. Jonathan Moffett, who was drummer for Michael Jackson for over 30 years, live shows and stuff, he did the same thing behind him. I'm going to say a couple more, and where's my battery? I'm at like 11%, so I don't have long. I'm going to die. Dave Garibaldi from Tower of Power, funk giant, amazing. Jojo Mayer, if you want to know about hand technique, this guy will break it down insanely. Jojo Mayer, secret weapons for the modern drummer. You can't leave out Neil Peart, right? All about drum solos. Some of the best songs he's played with Rush. Great DVD. I highly recommend that. Taking Center Stage. He's got a couple others out there that were really good too. And then finally, Billy Ward, Big Time. It's probably the most foundationally important DVD of my entire drumming career. Get this if you don't have it. If you're a drummer, Billy Ward, Big Time. It talks about all that mental stuff about how you think about time. So some of my drumming influences and a few other influences that I've had. I'd love to talk about more, but I've been at 45 minutes and my battery's getting ready to die. So it's been a fun morning. I love sharing this with you. I'm going to get a physical book list written out, well, digital probably, and I'll have a link for it. It'll be in my Google Drive or something like that. And I'll put a link to that in the Bear Chat. I'll maybe put it in the Hangout. Maybe in future videos, I'll get like links to that kind of stuff up in the description as well. So everybody, thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I love hanging out with all you guys. Thanks for sharing the links, getting more people in here. Yeah, I appreciate you enjoying my passion. This is what I love to do. And now I've got people who actually want to listen. So grow this, share it like crazy. Let people know, get more bears into this mix, get more non-bears converted. And there'd be more people to come and enjoy this. I'd love to see that. You guys are more than welcome. Thanks, Kika. Thank you, Big Sky. Blue Sky, sorry. Big Sky. Pender, Honky Bear. Goodness, all y'all. Y'all rock so much, and I love hanging out with you. So hopefully I'll catch y'all today in some of the other chats. But if you want to check out some cool drumming, check out my other YouTube channel, Steady in Time. I've got a couple of clips. I've actually got one fun one from when I was in Colorado a couple of years ago. Was it? Yeah, last year. And I filmed a drum solo up in the Rocky Mountains. Fun stuff like that. So feel free to check that out. Check out my Instagram, Steady in Time, all one word kind of deal. And I'm going to have some more videos up there soon. Maybe do some live stream drum solos. I'll try to stream a concert I'm playing next Tuesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. We'll be in Bloomington at Miller Park, Bloomington, Illinois, playing with the Aristocrats. I don't have an Aristocrats joke. Somebody asked me for an Aristocrat. I think it was John who wants an Aristocrats joke. I still don't have one yet. I'm working on it, but I remember. You guys give me great ideas. Let's keep it going. This is so much fun. Love you, Bears. Peace to you.